Welcome. Welcome back. I hope you all hear me fine. I'm Stephen Sas, and of course, on behalf of the Buddhist Association of the United States, the Chuanyan Monastery, and the Wuju Memorial Library, we are all very pleased to bring you another class of Summer Pali Intensive. This is class number 6. So we're 6/10 there already. Time is moving quickly for us. And I'm very happy to have my two friends helping me, Diane and Kaiti. And for people that might be on the YouTube live stream, we will try to address your questions via Diane, who is a very knowledgeable Pali person. And so today is our big day because we're transitioning from the Pali Primer to our new textbook, which is the Ger and Karunatilaka text, A New Course in Reading Pali, which is exciting also because we will now be looking directly at the Pali Canon itself. And so it's a very special moment when we can look at the teachings of the Buddha in Pali, which is the most direct connection we can possibly have to the teachings of our Buddha. And so I think we'll start off. I'll share my screen, and we'll have our look at Pali Primer Lesson 12. And remember, we're doing select numbers of Lesson 12. I think it's about 10. So again, we've talked about this a bit in the last class, but I will review. In this lesson, we have now the full conjugation of present tense active voice. And so prior to this, we've been only having third person, singular and plural, but now we have it opened up to all 6 possibilities for the verb. So we have 3 persons and singular and plural. And the other new piece of information that we have today are the personal pronouns. So I and we, you and you all, and he and them, or her and them, or it. And so just to make sure we all are on the same page, a pronoun is a word that stands in the place of a noun. So instead of possibly saying, Diane is very kind, I might say, she is very kind. And so she is the pronoun, which stands in the place of the name Diane. And a personal pronoun is a pronoun which stands for a person specifically, a name. So these are the personal pronouns. We also have in Pali demonstrative pronouns, which is like this and that, these, of them, of him, from him, all those possible variations. And we also have relative pronouns, which we'll start looking at very soon. So those are the 3, and I should mention that on this page we see the personal pronouns for the third person, so and te. So that would be it or he, and te would be they. But in the third person, the pronoun so can also mean that. So can be both personal and demonstrative. So pachti is he cooks. But if I were to say, for instance, so bhikkhu, it could also mean that bhikkhu. So is not going with a verb, it's going with a noun. It's demonstrative. So bhikkhu, that bhikkhu. But in these examples that we're covering now, we're looking at it as a personal pronoun, he or she. Although it has to be he because she would have a different letter there to make it feminine. These are masculine. Okay, so I think what we can do is once again ask for some volunteers to help us do these examples, and that can be done by raising your blue hand which I hope you have figured out how to do. And I would also like to ask that once you have participated, if you could most kindly lower your hand so I could sort of begin to keep track of who has spoken. Okay, so let's first go for Christopher. Christopher, are you there?
Yes, which number?
Yes, can you do for us lesson 12, number 1?
Fam mitehi sadim ratena apanamha bandana aharasi.
Yes, it's bandani.
Bandani.
So remember that if you have a long vowel, that is typically where the stress is placed.
And I have translated that as accompanied by friends. You bring goods from the shop with a chariot or vehicle. I think that's it.
Yes, that's it. Very good. So here we have our pronoun, tvang, you. I'm not correcting you, I'm just kind of stressing it or repeating it. Thank you. Aharasi, bring, and notice that the conjugation now is matching you, aharasi. And then the direct object of the bringing is bandani. Those are goods. So this is a accusative,
Plural.
neuter, plural, right? And then working our way backwards, we have our ablative from the shop, apanamha. And then we have our first instrumental, ratena, by cart or by chariot. And then we have another instrumental. This is the instrumental of accompaniment, mitehi sading. And so we have that special helper word, which is used for the instrumental of accompaniment. And notice always, or pretty much always, that that word sadim comes right after the word it's going with. And so that's how we know those two words are linked. So together with friends. So as you said, in perhaps a slightly different order, you bring goods from the shop by cart together with friends. Very good. Thank you. Okay. And now we can try Vera.
Good morning, Acharya. Number
Hi,
2, is
good
it?
morning. Yes, could you do for us number 2?
Okay. Aham udakamha padumani aharitua vanijasa dadami. Having brought lotuses from the water, I give to the merchant.
Yes.
Aham is a first person pronoun. Udakamha, ablative singular. Padumani, neuter, accusative plural. Aharitua, absolutive. Vanijasa, dative singular. Dadami, third person singular.
Exactly right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, perfect. So I'll say it one more time in English, and perhaps there's a slightly different order, but there always can be a slightly different order to translate these. It shouldn't change the meaning. And so I, having brought lotus flowers from the water, give them to the merchant. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Now let's try Yulia.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi. Can you do for us number 3?
Okay, number 3. Tumhe samananang datung chiwarani pariyesata. You seek for the robes to give to the disciples.
Yes, or search. Yes. So tell me, what is tumhe? What person is that?
Second person plural.
Perfect. Exactly right. Second person plural. So it's all of you. You all. And so we notice that that is being reflected in our verb with the ta ending. Pariyesata. You all, or all of you search. That's what this verb means, to search. And then search for what? Robes. Chivarani. Our neuter accusative plural.
Plural, yes.
Right. And then we have, this is the infinitive of the verb dadati, to give, so to give. And then we have, what case is samananang?
Yes, samananang dative.
Dative.
Dative plural.
Exactly right. Very good. Thank you. I think we have it right. So I'll say it one more time in English. You all search for robes to give to monks. Good. Okay. Can we try now Irene?
Yes, Stephen.
Hi. Can you do for us, I think our next example would be number 9.
Number 9. Ahang udakang oruhe brahmanasa dusani dovami. Having descended in the water, I wash clothes of the Brahmin.
Yes, exactly right. So ahang is the first person singular. I, dovami. So notice that that a is strengthened in the first person dovami. I wash. But we have here absolutive, oroiha, having descended into the water. And so notice that that takes the accusative as its object immediately before it to the water. Then I wash, dusani, garments or clothes of the Brahmin, or the Brahmin's clothes. So that would be our genitive singular. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And can we now try Catherine?
Stephen.
I don't hear. There you are, Catherine.
You hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Which number?
Could you do for us number 10?
Number 10. Tuam gehasa dwaram piwaritwa haniyam patamha adaya pivasi. Having opened the door of the house and taken water from the bowl, you drink.
Yes, very good. That's a little complicated, but you have it exactly right. So you've navigated very well our two absolutives, vivaritva, having entered, or having opened, I apologize, having opened the door, dvarang, and then our genitive of the house, and then adaya, from adati, having taken, where are we? Water from the bowl. This is, what case is patamha?
Patamha is ablative singular.
Yes, exactly. Right. So it's a slightly weird order, but
yeah,
having taken it, I think it would be more normal for these two words to be reversed in order, but I think we understand the meaning. And then at the end we have our finite verb, pivasi. You drink, pivasi. So si is you, which goes exactly with tvam. So as you said, you, having opened the door of the house, having taken water from the bowl, drink. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's try another. Can we try Jim?
Hi, Stephen.
Hi. Can you do for us, please, 13?
Sure. Pasanasmin tatva tvam chandam pasitum usahasi. And that means, having stood on the rock, you try to see the moon.
Yes, right. So which verb, what is the finite form of tatva? Which verb is that?
Tatva, it's having stood, so it'd be titati?
Yes, titati. That's right. So this is one of the examples where the absolutive goes back to the root, which would be ta, or in Sanskrit sta, which is kind of, to me at least, seems to sound a bit like stand or stable. And then what case, please? Pasanasming?
That's the locative singular.
Right. And then we have it, as you said, tvang usa hasi, you try. And then what is pasitung?
It's the infinitive for to see.
Exactly. And then the object, right to the left of it, chandang, the moon.
Chandam, accusative.
Exactly right. Perfect. So standing or having stood, I think it could be taken possibly either way. So as I've said already, most of the time, or generally perhaps, the absolutive implies an action immediately preceding or before the main finite verb of the sentence, but it also can have a kind of simultaneous sense. So here I thought perhaps it could have that simultaneous same time sense. So standing on the rock, you try to see the moon. Very good. Okay. And now we can try tet. Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, good. Would you do for us, please, number 14?
Maya manulasa lokama chawitwa sagi upajitong akankama. Maya is like we. That's why it will be akankama.
Exactly.
Thank you. Manulasa lokama chavitwa. So leave the world of the human. Sage upajitum, that is the infinitive, like to be in the heaven.
Yes, or to arise in.
Akan to arise in the heaven. Akan kama is like want, wish.
That's right.
Wish to.
Yes. So can you tell us now just a free flowing English translation?
Thank you. Sure. Having left the world of the humans, we wish to be born in the heaven.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you. So let me just say we have this kind of word which you could not find in your vocabulary list because it's what's called a compound, which is a joining of two or more words. It's a very common thing to happen in Pali. I've talked a little bit about the Lego concept of sticking things together and then sticking those things to other things. And so the two component parts of this compound are manusa, which is human or person, and loka, which is world, perhaps even realm in this case. And then we have this ablative suffix, so from the human world. And so I hope that was not too tricky for everybody to sort of break apart this compound and see what its pieces are or were. Okay, good. And now we can try Linda.
Yes, hello.
I think we're up to 17.
Yes, we are. Okay. Tuang rukkamule nisidit tuang rukkamule nisiditwa acharya sadatung watang sibasi. So you sow Having sat at the root of the tree, you sew clothes to give to offer to the teacher.
Yes, excellent. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So tell me, please, what case is rukamule?
Rukamule is the locative singular.
Exactly.
It's rukka and mula.
Yeah.
Rukka and mula. Yeah.
So it is not an accusative, but in this case it's a locative.
Locative.
Right.
Singular.
At the base or at the root of a tree. That's another compound,
Yes.
again, of rukka and mula, root.
Yes.
And then what do we call this datung? What verb is that from?
Datung is from I think is the dati.
Yes, it is.
The dati, yes. It's
So,
to offer, to give.
Exactly right.
Right.
Very good. Thank you so much. Perfect.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. And I think we have a couple more. We have Uyen. Are you there?
Yes.
Great. Can you do for us 22?
22, okay.
And
So,
I just, sorry, one thing is I gave a sort of adjustment for this one. I hope you saw that. I think it's much better to take matu lamha as matu lassa. And I can explain that in a moment, but please go ahead now.
yes. So, paniyam, pipitwa, patang, pinditwa, matulamha, payate. We have two absolutive here. Paniyam, pinditwa, having drunk the water. Patam, pinditwa, having broken the bowl. So is the he. Bayati is fear. Yes, I think I want to ask the question about Matulamha.
Yes.
Yeah.
So matulama, as I'm sure you know, is an ablative.
Ablative, yeah.
But in Pali grammar, typically the word to fear, actually just like it is in English, takes the genitive. In fact, this is called, and we have this in a chapter, I know because I've looked at it, the genitive of fear in Garen Tilaka. So verbs like bhayati, to fear, take the genitive as sort of what is the object of the fearing. So just like in English, I might say fear of flying, fear of heights. It's the same. This of is the genitive quality. And so that's why it's much better to use matulassa. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I will translate it, the whole sentence.
Please.
Having drunk the water and broken the bowl, he fears the uncle.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. And so I hope we now understand a little bit about the genitive of fear. Let's take one more. I think we have Pat for number 24, please.
Okay. Oh boy, this is not one I looked at, so I'm going to see what I can do. So mayam aranyang avisitva ajanang panani sangharama. Okay, so we forest pavisati is having entered ajanang. That is not to do with goats, is it? What is it?
What is the word? The word aja is a goat. What case is this with the anang?
Yeah, so it's one of two plural forms. I believe it was accusative or genitive.
Not accusative. It would have to be genitive or dative, but it is dative, plural.
Okay, dative plural. And panna was leaves, if I'm not.
It is leaves. It is a neuter accusative plural.
Okay, and sangharama.
It's the verb to collect. So putting that all together, how do you read it?
So we collect Um, the goats having entered the forest, leaves, we collect leaves. Strange.
Okay, I'll having entered the forest, so that's pavisitva aranyang, or aranyang pavisitva. We, mayang, collect samharamha, leaves, that's the object, and then we have here our dative plural. So dative plural is expressed as for the goats. So we collect leaves for the goats. Very good.
Makes more sense.
Okay, I'm glad we've cleared that up. Okay, so now I think we've completed the exercises that we wanted to cover. And so I'll ask, now if your hand is up, it should be, if you have a question, we can have, this is our sort of our last call for Pali Primer. And so if you have a question for either this chapter or other chapters we have covered in this class, if you were doing your review homework and you even looked at the key, but somehow it just didn't quite make sense to you, this can be an opportunity to see if we can figure it out together. And so I'll take those questions now, and I'll also ask Diane in a moment to relay any questions that might arise on the YouTube. And so now I'll ask, I see Huang.
Yes.
Which question do you have, please?
Yeah. My question is on lesson 12, number 10.
Okay. Let me go back. Hold on one second. Okay. What is the question?
The question is, for me, it's a little bit confused because of this situation. I was inside of the house and I opened the door, or I was outside the house and I opened the door, because haven't opened the door of the house and haven't taken water from the bowl. What action occurs first? I enter to the house and I take the water,
yes,
or I was in the house. Yeah.
So the answer, I think, as I understand it, is we kind of start from the left to the right. And so we would take those absolutives in that order. So the first one we encounter moving across, scanning across, would be vivaritva. So we would take that as the first action, having opened the door. And then I imagine the person is sort of inside now, and then the person having taken the water. And then finally is pivasi, you drink. So is that better now? Do you get it?
Yeah, so from the left to the right. Is that
yes.
correct? Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, let's take a few more questions. We have Catherine.
Yes, Stephen?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, question number 18.
In this same chapter, same page?
Yes.
But we didn't do 18, right? 18 is the skipped one.
Number 18?
Yes, we didn't do 18 because 18 has some pieces I didn't want to cover.
Oh, I see. Then okay, it's okay because there's a word that I don't understand.
Yeah, well, don't worry about it then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your question, though. Okay, now we have a question from Christopher.
Oh, yes. In the chapter we were just doing, lesson 12.
Yes.
Number 9.
Okay.
Where it says Brahmanasa, so aham udakam uruiha Brahmanasa dusani dovami. The Brahmanasa, it could be, I think we translated it as genitive, but I think it can also be dative. So it's almost the same meaning, but having descended into the water, I wash clothes, either the Brahmin's clothes or I wash clothes for the Brahmin. Is that also correct?
It is a possibility, and as you say correctly, it could be a dative. But it's impossible to say, right? But it just, I would take it as a genitive. It's just from experience, it would, if that were to be a dative, I would look for Brahmanaya. But again, it is ambiguous, so it's not correct. It's not incorrect.
The meaning is almost the same in any case, I think.
Yes, and dative and genitive are often a little bit ambiguous. And as you say, they have a very, very close meaning. So we don't need to worry too much about it, but it is a good point that those two can be shared. Yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take another question. Sharosha.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
I just had a general question. Does Pali traditionally have punctuation, or are we supposed to read it through the sentence structure and like how the words are spelled out?
It's a good question. I mean, originally Pali was not even written down, right? You know, so therefore we just heard it and we figured that out. Then later it was written down, but I think it was not written down with any punctuation. Of course, we also know that there's no capital and lowercase letters in many Asian languages, right? Yes. And I think they were not only not written with punctuation, but they were probably not even written with spaces between words.
Oh dear.
I know that is certainly the case for, say, ancient Latin. That people just, you had to be very literate to read. But the good news is today for us, as I showed you in that website of the Sixth Council, the Tipitaka, there's the punctuation that we see here, this kind of punctuation, commas, yes, periods, semicolons even. We have those. So there's no need to worry about that.
So generally we would find the Romanized script having punctuation as opposed to the traditional like Sinhala or Burmese scripts.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't tell you. What is your language?
Tamil and Sinhala.
So probably in Sinhala you can find if there is punctuation or not. I don't know the answer, unfortunately. But do you have access to Buddha Jayanti edition? That's the sort of, I'm pretty sure that's the great Sinhala edition. And I would very much like to read that myself one day. I'm trying to learn the characters so I can read it. I know Venerable Bodhi is very fond of that edition and has used it for his translations. But I can't tell you if it has punctuation, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. Diane, are there any questions that we're getting about Pali Primer in general up to lesson 12?
No, no questions.
Not a one. Wow. Well, that's kind of amazing. It seems like we're ready to move on. We're ready to leave Pali Primer behind us. And that's fine. And so let me close my file and let's move on. So, as you probably know, our new book, Giảng Karuna has initial readings, and then it has a big grammar summary, and then it has further readings. And I've placed, for those people who are unable to get a copy of the Pali Primer actual book, a scan of the grammar summary. So I'm calling that up now. I hope you can see it. Dan, is my screen being shared?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, the first thing maybe I'll mention is that we have our vocabulary list. And as I've mentioned before, our vocabulary list is in the Pali alphabetical order. And so that's an important thing to know. The alphabet order is an important thing to know. Otherwise, you might have a long time looking for words, just kind of scanning from top to bottom. And so as we can see here, akusala is the first word on this list because it's a short A, and it has this guttural k. So that is the first letter on this list. And so, of course, not only is it alphabetized by the first letter, but the subsequent letters as well. So k and g come, and then this is actually the palatal nasal. Then we have the dentals, t and d, and n, and then we have r, s, and h, ahang, I, which we all know very well, and going forward. And so that is the first thing to know, that we need to remember our Pali alphabet order to be able to use the glossary lists and eventually dictionaries with ease. Otherwise, we end up just kind of looking all around without any order. The second thing perhaps to mention is that we have had 5.5 classes now on our basic declension of masculine short A and neuter short A. So this table should be very familiar, and so should not present any problems for us. Our new group of nouns, our new declension, so to speak, are the feminine short and long I, which are almost exactly the same. It's almost not even worth mentioning the differences. It's minuscule, as you've seen. And I've mentioned in our last class, this word rati is night. And we can see that in the feminine nouns, there are fewer case endings. Or another way to say that is more cases share an ending, which, as I said in the last class, is both good and bad news, because we don't have to worry so much about case endings, learning so many. On the other hand, we do have to be able to discern or tell which case ending is being used. It might not be immediately obvious just by looking at the word alone. We have to put it within a context. And so we have the thing to know. We have the way to conjugate in all three persons, singular and plural, which we've just talked about. And so we have labami and labama. Here, unlike in Pali Primer, we have it in the more Western way, which is first, second, and third, I being first, that kind of Western I-centric way. And so this is also somewhat of a review. Note, please, that in the first person, the A is strengthened. So while in the third person, it's labati, when we have the first person, me, suffix, it's labami. So we put the stress accent there on the long vowel, labami and labama. And so maybe that's what I'll talk about now for grammar. I don't want everyone to become grammar overloaded. And I'll go to my file of the readings. And so, as I mentioned, I've created files, word processing files of the readings, which we've placed on our monastery's website, which hopefully will be of use, because you could possibly print them out, you could make them bigger, and you could notate them, and you could do lots of other things that you might not be able to do in the little tiny text that one finds in the textbook. And it's much easier for me to talk about it on the screen. So here, the first thing we have is the going for refuge. And so we have several things going on here to mention. First of all, we have the verb gachati, to go, in the first person singular. So this is all I go. And notice that the long A is there, gachami. So it's not gachami, it's gachami, which people often know because these things are recited quite often. And now perhaps you know even more about what you have been saying. Now, the next interesting to notice is that, as we've been saying, verbs of motion take the accusative for their object. So the destination of a verb of motion is generally found in the accusative case. And that is what we find here. So the word sarana And that stem form, perhaps, would be the form I think you would find. Let's take a look. In the dictionary. Saranang. So it's in fact a, I should mention this, it's a neuter. And what Giảng and Tilaka do is when they list in the vocabulary a neuter, they put it in the nominative. So it sort of tells you that it's a neuter. But it's in the accusative here, which, as you know, shares that ending. And so what's interesting here is that the English grammar of this sentence and the Pali grammar don't line up ultra precisely. And so literally it says, I go to the Buddha refuge. Or I go to the Buddha refuge, or I go to the refuge Buddha. But of course, when we say this in English, we use the word for. We make sort of a prepositional phrase out of it. But Budang and Saranam are going together here as objects of the verb in the same accusative case. And so Budang Saranang Gacchami has no stated subject, I. And you know that the I is built into the verb. So we could say Ahang Budang Saranang Gacchami. But the ahang, the pronoun I, is built into the verb, and so it's just not necessary. And in this case, it's just not used. And so we have Budang, Dhammang, and Sanghang. Notice here too, and I mentioned this way back in the first or second class of this summer group, that Giảng and Tilaka have chosen to represent this guttural nasal with the ang character. In other places, it would be represented this way, with the dot above. That's perhaps the more typical way. So it is exactly the same pronunciation, but for whatever reason, they've chosen to represent the guttural nasal this way. And so that's how we have it. Now notice here, as you all know, that going for refuge takes place 3 times. Doing things in groups of 3 is a big part of Pali, it seems. And the number, this for a second time, is represented by this word dutiyang, which looks like it is in the accusative case, which it is, but it's not really functioning so much as an accusative object. It has much more of a adverbial kind of sense, sort of secondly. So I have at the end of my file some numbers. And so as it is in English, there are sort of 2 sets of numbers. There's the kind of regular counting numbers, 1, 2, 3. Those are the cardinal numbers, I believe. And then there's also the ordinal numbers, the kind of ordering numbers, and that would be in English 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and that's what we're finding in this sentence. So here, first is patama, second is dutiya, and so dve, which is the cardinal form of number 2, just the regular number 2, is in the counting, in the ordinal form, the ordering way, it's dutiya, and then tatiya. And so that's what we see here. And then this little bit, tiny word pi, means something like also, or to, T-O-O, to. So for a second time, I go to the Buddha for refuge. Literally, it says, second, also, Buddha refuge, I go. And the third sentence is, third, also, Buddha refuge, I go. And so, of course, things in Pali are not expressed in the same way they are in English. And so for those of us like me, who is very used to things being expressed one way, has to get used to being finding things expressed in other ways. And so it's just a sort of learning process to understand the Pali syntax. So I go for refuge a second time, and I go for refuge also for a third time. And so that, I think, explains the going for refuge bit. And now we'll move on to our second set of readings, which is from the Anguttara Nikaya. I think I even have here from Book of Ones, from the Adanta Vago, Untamed. So the Book of Ones is all about one thing, typically. And so I'll start by reading it for you, and then I'll explain it, and then maybe we can have a volunteer read and explain a similar one. And so here, our first sentence, really, from the canon is Chittang bhikkhave adantang mahato anataya sangvatati ti. So there's lots of things going on here. Where do we start? Well, one of the things we see right away is this vocative, bhikkhave, O monks. As I mentioned, it's a very commonly found feature of the Pali Canon. And in a prior class, I even pointed out how translators often just don't bother sometimes translating it because in English, at least, it kind of becomes very repetitive, but it's sort of the Pali flavor. And so when we read the Pali, we're happy to find it. Now, the subject of the sentence is the chitta, the mind. Notice that the mind, at least in ancient Indian Pali, is not the same as the brain. It's more of a conceptual thing. And so that is also why sometimes the word chitta is translated as the heart, or even heart-mind, because it's rather hard to say where exactly this chitta is. And we don't even have to worry about it too much, but we know that it is somewhere as part of us, and it is a neuter noun. And so that's why it has the chittang as the neuter nominative, and it is the subject of this sentence, the mind. And now we have an adjective, adantang. And this, notice that it matches the case, because adjectives must match the case, number, and gender of the nouns they modify. So let me point that out in the grammar summary, if I can find it. Yeah, so here we have in grammar number 7. So quickly, an adjective, what's an adjective? An adjective is a word that describes a noun, or possibly even another adjective. And as we have in our textbook, as I just said, adjectives agree in gender, case, and number with the nouns that they modify. So adjectives are sort of free agents in that way, that they don't have an inherent thing. They go along with the word they're going along with. And so here we have a few examples. Kusalo Dhammo. So Dhamma is a masculine short A noun, and here it is presented in the nominative, singular. So Dhammo is being described as kusalo, wholesome or good, and so they match. Second one is Dhamma in the plural. And so as I've said before, Dhamma is a very hard word to translate in one way. And so in the first sentence, or the first bit, kusalo Dhammo, Dhamma is probably, as they have here, translated as the doctrine. But in the second sentence, well, it's a plural, so it's probably not really doctrines. And the Dhamma, in this sense, has more of a sense of quality or factor. And so it's pluralized, and then the adjective to its left, so notice the adjective comes to its left or right before it, is akusala. And so first of all, we see that the word kusala is made negative with the A prefix akusala, unwholesome or bad, and it's pluralized to match. And our third is chittang adantang. Here, it's not before, and that is actually probably because, as it says here, this adjective is derived from a verb, which in a technical sense, we can say that this adjective is a past participle of a verb, but we don't have to worry about that for now. We just have to know that it's an adjective that is describing chittang. They're translating here as subdued, or maybe untamed. It's a negated adjective with that short A prefix. So that explains a little bit about adjectives. So here, chittang adantang, the untamed mind. And then we go to our verb, sangvatati, which means to lead to. And a very crucial thing to know about the verb sangvatati, leads to, is that it takes the dative case as its object, just like it sounds, leads to. So to, dative case. And so we have the word, the object of it, right next to it, anataya. And so I hope you recognize that this word is in the dative case with that aya suffix. And so this word, I'll write it here first, is originally atta. In Sanskrit, this would be arta. This word actually can have multiple meanings, but in this sense, it has the sense of benefit, a good thing. But in our sentence, it's negated with the negated A, negator A. But we can't just put an A next to the A. So we put this consonant in between to help it out. So anatta, not beneficial. Okay? And then this, in fact, this word is being described with mahato. And so mahato is also dative adjective, although we haven't had this case. So we haven't had this declension, so you'll have to take my word for it. But it's going together as a dative, mahato. It's the same kind of to dative as we have in bhagavato, arahato. So the mind untamed, monks, leads to great disadvantage, perhaps. So that's our translation, and that's my explanation of our first sentence. And so I would like to see if somebody would be, a brave soul would like to volunteer for us to read for us the second sentence, which is the same, but reversed in meaning, and give us a sort of explanation. So I have one hand, Sharosha.
Hi.
Hi, I hear you.
Okay.
Are you able to do this second sentence for us?
All right, I'll try.
Thank you.
Chittam bhikkave aguttam mahatto anatta.
Wait. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've skipped
Oh,
over.
I'm sorry. I mixed it. Oh, okay. Chittam bhikkave dantam mahatto attaya samvattatiti.
Mm-hmm.
So the mind, so the first is chittam, so O monks, the mind, so dantam is the opposite of adantam.
Yes.
So since adantam is untamed, this would be tamed.
Yes,
so
you're right.
The tamed mind, mahatto would mean something like very much, I guess.
Yes.
Very much. Attaya would be the opposite of anattaya, which is, so attaya would be beneficial.
Yes, or benefit.
Leads to great benefit, I guess.
Yes.
So it would be monks, O monks, a tamed mind would lead to great benefit.
Exactly. Very good.
Okay.
Wow.
You.
Have you done Pali for a while? You're good.
This kind of stuff I like.
Okay.
the grammar exercises just throw me off, but
Okay. Well, this is real Pali, and so it's maybe more fun. So thank you.
More direct, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. One piece of information I neglected to explain, which I will write now, is this T thing at the end. So the T is the English equivalent, or the English equivalent would be something like end quote, end of statement, end quote. So that's like saying end, we're stopping here, stopping point. But there's no beginning point. There's no opening of the quotes ever in Pali, but there's often, very often, the ending of the quotes. And I think this must have been a very important feature of oral Pali, so we understood, when we sort of are listening, when there was the end of a sentence and when a new sentence would begin, because it was not on the page and there was no spacing. So we listen for this T to tell us end, stopping point. And the other interesting piece of information to know is you notice here that Sangvatati has a long I. The last I is long. And that is not because it's some weird conjugation we haven't learned, not at all. It is T, which is matching Chittang as a singular. But it's lengthened because when it comes right before T, it is lengthened. And that just simply must be sort of a sounding thing. So Sangvatati T. So that is why there is a long I, or we can say that vowels that precede the T get lengthened. Okay? And so let's look at the next one. I'll read the first one. Chittang bhikkhave agutang mahato anataya sangvatati. So the mind, O monks, unguarded, agutang. So this is our adjective describing the mind. The unguarded mind, sangvatati, leads to, and remember, the verb sangvatati takes the dative as its object. So great disadvantage, perhaps, because the great is mahato. That's another dative, because it's sort of an adjective too. So the unguarded mind leads to great disadvantage, O monks. So that's our first, and now we can have a volunteer do the second one, and we can have Uyen.
Chittam bhikkhave guttam mahato attaya samvatati. O monks, guttam, guarded chittam, mind, guarded mind leads to great advantage.
Yes, exactly. So as you've said, we have attaya not as a negative thing. It's the good thing. It's atta, the benefit or advantage. It's in the dative case. And it's going with mahato, also it's a dative. So great advantage. And then we have the positive form of agutang, which is just gutang, guarded.
Guarded.
Yeah, it's I think you have it just exactly right. Thank you. Okay, let's try another one. Chittang bhikkhave arakitang mahato anataya sangvatati iti. So here our new word, we just are plugging in one new word, which is rakati. Well, the verb is rakati, to protect. And it's negated, and it is now functioning as an adjective. So the unprotected mind, O monks, leads to great disadvantage. And this sentence structure, this syntax is precisely the same. And so we're sort of building our vocabulary with these very similar sounding sentences, which probably were chanted in a sort of very reverential way. And I should mention that it's, we do study Pali on the page, which means we often study it silently, but it can be of great benefit to say these things out loud. And I would say it has an effect on the mind to read these sentences carefully out loud, to hear the sounds of Pali even if we are alone. So let's try Jim. If you wouldn't mind doing the very next sentence for us, please.
Sure. Chitam bhikkhave rakitam mahato ataya samvatati. So, mind, O monks, and it's not negated, so a protected mind leads to great benefit.
Yes, very good. So tell me just one more time, what case is ataya?
Ataya is the dative, because the samvatati needs the dative case.
That's right, as well as mahato is dative. And what case is rakitam, by the way?
Rakitam is the nominative because it has to agree with chitam.
That's right. It's an adjective in the nominative neuter singular. Very good. Thank you. Okay, let's look at another one. Chittang bhikkhave asangvutang mahato anataya sangvatati. So the word sangvutang means restrained, or sort of held back. But it's again negated first. So asangvutang would have the sense of unrestrained. So the mind, the unrestrained mind, O monks, leads to great disadvantage. Yes, sangvutang and asangvutang. And now we can have yatra.
Yes.
Would you mind doing for us the next sentence, please?
Chitang bhikkhave sangvutam mahato ataya sangvatatiti.
Yes.
Okay. So the restrained mind, O monks, leads to great advantage.
Exactly right. And tell us one more time, what case is ataya and why?
So the ataya, I can't remember the ataya is it should be an accusative of direction of movement.
No, it's not the accusative case. It's a different case. Which case has an aya suffix?
Oh yes, it is the it's the dative case. Yes,
it is the dative case because the reason is because the verb sangvatati takes the dative, and it is just as we say in English leads to. That to piece is sort of an applying a dative, and so I see why you might be slightly puzzled because it sounds maybe it's like a verb of motion and taking the accusative.
That's right. Yes.
Yes.
So that's right. So I wasn't even looking at the case.
Yeah, I understand. So I'm just trying to kind of clear that up for everybody that sangvatati in particular, especially, takes dative, and that's why we have a dative. Very good. Thank you. Okay, now let's look at something a little more complicated. Maybe I should mention something here first from the grammar, which is the idea of the relative pronoun. This is a new thing for us, and it's this thing here, yang. And one thing to know is that the relative pronoun starts with the Y. So the Y, the letter Y, is the marker for relative pronoun. And so here I'm referring to our grammar bit. In fact, this is a slightly less typical way that the relative pronoun is used. But as the book tells us, the relative pronoun has the stem ya, and the case forms of the masculine neuter relevant to this lesson are as follows. Other forms will be given later, namely in chapter 2, I believe. And so you'll notice here that the suffixes are familiar to you because they are the same as the ones we've covered for the declension. And so yo and yang, just like damo and chittang. And instrumental, of course, we are skipping many others. It's not like there is only nominative and instrumental, but we're just talking about instrumental here, is yena, and the same for neuter, yena. So of course the ena suffix is the instrumental suffix we know already. And so it tells us that the relative pronoun may be used like the English relatives, who, that, etc. I often translate it as that which, to introduce a relative clause modifying a noun that it follows. So let's take a look at some examples. And of course, this example has some ellipses, these 3 dots, which means they're missing bits. And so, anyang ekadamang yang evang sangvatati ti. Notice here the sangvatati ti is without a space, but it has this kind of little mark over it, which is telling us it's lengthened. So Dhamma, as I have been saying, can be translated in multiple ways. And in this way, in this example, it's being translated as a thing. And it's being compounded with the number 1, eka. So one thing, or a single thing, and it's being described as anyang, another, or other. So that is matching it in its case. And so this yang is that. We're going to read it as that. Evang is the word for thus, which I'm sure you know because we all know. Evang me sutang, thus I have heard. So evang is thus. And then we have leads to. Sangvatati, the verb. So that's our quick introduction to relative pronouns. So this is actually 2 sentences. And so we have a number of balls in the air. And I've tried to color code it. Perhaps it will help us. There's sort of a lot going on here. So, Nahang bhikkhave anyang ekadamang pi samanu pasami yang evang adantang agutang arakitang asangvutang mahato anataya sangvatati yattayidang bhikkhave chitang. Chitang bhikkhave adantang agutang arakitang asangvutang mahato anataya sangvatati. And so I hope you all haven't just signed off this meeting. I hope there's somebody still out there. But if you look carefully, most of these pieces, probably 90% or more, are words we've just covered and just kind of just stuck together in a fancier way. And so the first thing to know is this first word, which you probably kind of recognize because we've been talking about the first person singular pronoun, which is ahang, I. But it is negated. And so it is negated with the n, which sounds a lot like the English no. So it's not hard to remember. And so it's na ahang. But when na and ahang are sort of joined together, the technical word for that is sandhi, which we'll maybe talk about in the next class. The A gets lengthened. And so it's nahang. I don't. Not I. Or I not, but it's more like I don't. And then we want to go to the verb, which is right here. Sam anupasami. And so we probably kind of recognize at least part of this word, which is pasami, which is the verb pasati in the singular first person, pasami, I see. I hope you can see that. But we also find in this particular verb its prefix, so to speak, with 2 things. Anu, which often has the sense of along with, and sang, which has the sense of together. And so putting that all together, this verb, I believe, is often translated as perceive. So it has a different sense, but a similar sense to see. But it has more of a specific sense of perceiving. And so what is the object of the seeing? Ekadamang. One thing. And it's joined with this P, which is kind of a little bit, which means also, which we almost don't have to translate. And so, and then this word is being explained or further described with this thing, anyang, another, or any other. So putting this piece of our sentence so far together, up to the verb, I do not perceive any other one thing, or I do not perceive any one thing, that young, thus, that thus. And then we have here our 4 familiar, hopefully, because we've just done them, adjectives: untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained. Sangvatati, notice how the I is a regular I because it's not the end of a sentence, leads to, and then we have our familiar, mahato anataya, great disadvantage. And now we have a new word, which is yata idang, which means namely, or that is to say. Yata idang, very, very common word, a good word to know. And of course we have to have our vocative, O monks, just to make sure they're paying attention here. Chittang, the mind. So putting that all together, we can read monks, or we could put the monks later. I do not perceive any other one thing that thus untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained, that leads to great disadvantage, namely, or that is to say, O monks, the mind. And then we have sort of here an emphatic mind, the mind, O monks, untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained, leads to great disadvantage. So that, I hope, explains this big first look at some real Pali. And so maybe perhaps I'll very quickly ask if there are any questions about what I've covered so far in Giảng Karuna-Tilaka, if I've said anything that wasn't clear. I see a couple hands already. Okay, let's see. Malini?
Sorry. Thanks, Stephen. I just wanted to know how you know that Mahato is the dative case.
The answer is that you might not know, because we haven't covered this kind of group of words. But if you remember the phrase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato, then you are saying datives there, homage to him, to the Blessed One, to the Worthy One. And so that is a case ending that we haven't covered yet. Okay. But so don't be surprised that it's not clear. But so you have to maybe take my word for it for now. Or you could sort of look ahead and find the vant, munt group of nouns or adjectives and see the case endings there. But the to suffix there means dative, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we have Rob.
Yeah, hi. My question is, I see at least 3 different variations on that ending quote. At the bottom of the page here, you've got double quotes. Above that, you've got single quote. Sometimes you had nothing. In the Karuna-Tilaka book, you had I with a circumflex and then no space. I assume they're all equivalent. Which is the more common? What is the best one?
I think I see. It's probably just my sloppiness to put 1 or 2. It makes no difference. How about that? Then we can say double quote is better. The circumflex, what the circumflex is telling us in Giảng Karuna-Tilaka is that there has been a sandhi, there has been a joining of 2 words. And it's not just a lengthened vowel, but it's a lengthened vowel as part of a compound. And maybe we'll talk about that more next time. But they are all equivalent, and it's not worth being overly concerned about, I would say. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now we have Mary. Yes?
Hello, Stephen.
Hi.
I just want to ask a word. From Pali Primer, we know that the word protect is rakati.
The verb, yes.
but in this book it becomes Rakita.
That's
So
right.
which one do you?
The answer is the word rakitang is not a verb. Rakati is a verb. Rakitang is actually a different form of the verb. It's a participle, but we can just simply say it's an adjective. And so since it's an adjective, which means it's describing another noun, that's what adjectives do, and it is not a verb, that's why it's in this way. I hope that answers your question. I'll take one or two more. Or maybe I should ask quickly, Diane, are there any questions or lack of clarity on YouTube?
No, there was a question about yata idam.
Yes.
But it means namely, or that is to say. Someone
Yes.
wanted to know if it was a compound of yata, ya, and idam, and I said it was yata and idam.
Yes, it's a compound of yata and idang with a y, sometimes called a liaison consonant, stuck in to help it be pronounced. And it also is, I would say, indeclinable. It doesn't get declined. It always is yata idang, namely, or that is to say. And we have one final question at the end of our class from Linda.
Yes, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen. I would like to ask you about the chittang. Like it says chittang pikawe asang wutang mahato anataya samwata titi. Now the nominative, is it chittang or asang wutang?
Chittang is a neuter nominative.
Neuter, okay.
And asangvutam is a adjective. And adjectives must match the words they are describing in case, number, and gender. They're sort of free agents. And so that means in this example, this sentence, asangvutang is also neuter nominative singular. It's exactly going in line with chittang, which is neuter. And so please remember, as I've said, that we have to keep track of which nouns are neuter and which nouns are not, because we might be tricked into thinking we're looking at an accusative. But we have to remember that neuter nouns form the nominative singular with this ang. So it is nominative, not accusative. Okay?
So both of them are nominative.
Yes, they are. They are the subject of the sentence. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we're coming to our end of our class. And so I would like you to at least have a look. I know it might be hard to fully understand what's happening without assistance, but we're going to do it slowly for next week. And I wanted to point out or tell you that we will be putting a very important resource on our website. If you haven't seen it yet, it's not there yet, but perhaps you know about it, which is a sort of answer key for Ger and Karuna Tilaka, kindly created by a man from Australia named John Kelly, who I once had the very good fortune of meeting. And what it is all the readings from this book, which are translated, as you can see in blue, and it also tells us where these readings come from. So it's a very good resource, and I will be placing it hopefully very soon upon the website so you can begin to work on the translations yourself. But if they seem a bit overwhelming and hard to understand, please do not be discouraged, because we will work on them together. So please come back. Okay, thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week for week number 4, I think, our 7th class. That's exciting. Really, I'm very pleased that we're looking at Buddha Dhamma now, that we're reading the words of the Buddha together. So thank you all very much. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Valucita, qué importante es que te acordaste.